Representative Monica Robb Blasdel. Welcome to Message from the House.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Olivia. It's great to be here today.
I think you have such a unique story, and you've been such a dynamic lawmaker from pretty much the month you got in. The focus today is going to be on the small village of East Palestine, when that area was really thrust into the national spotlight when the train derailment happened. You had been in office for a month?
1 month? Yes, 1 month to the day, actually. Yes.
Just talk me through what was going through your mind, the day that you heard about this incident.
Yeah, so unfortunately, as you mentioned, 1 month into my first term in the Ohio House of Representatives, the train derailment happened on a Friday evening. And so I woke up Saturday morning to multiple text messages and calls, unfortunately. And my home at the time, actually, I'm less than 6 miles from the train derailment site, actually. So I was close by. So woke up and immediately started making calls to our county commissioners and to the mayor of East Palestine and the fire chief to try to just gather information at the time. So once I kind of got a handle on that, it was like, all right, where can I best serve my constituents? And obviously the safety of the constituents, of the residents of East Palestine, was my number one priority, and still remains that priority, still remains today. And so I traveled to East Palestine that morning, on that Saturday morning. I was on the phone with then Speaker at the time, Speaker Jason Stevens, and updating him on what was going on in the district. And so there was just a lot of collaboration throughout that entire weekend. Governor DeWine swiftly came into the district and was there in the village of East Palestine within days, and had multiple briefings and conversations with the locals and the residents, trying to keep everybody informed.
Yeah, and your family, not even just your immediate family, but your extended family, you all are from the area.
Yes, that's correct. At the time, I was living in the city of Columbiana, which is just the next city over from the village of East Palestine. I have family that live in New Waterford and Leetonia, so we are all within about 5 to 6 miles from ground zero.
It's twofold, right? You're looking after your constituents, but these people are also your family.
Exactly. I have a lot of friends and friends that live in the village of East Palestine, and
Right.
They had to be removed from their homes for days. So it was very concerning at the time.
And there's no handbook for new legislators,
Right,
And
yeah.
so just talk me through how you were learning on the job and what you feel like that month really did teach you to propel you to the next couple years.
Yeah, this is definitely not anything that you can prepare for. And if I had to give advice to my colleagues in the House and in the Senate, I would just say you just kind of have to find your role in the situation and do your best to serve your constituents. So there were so many agencies involved, and I was glad that I had relationships with the state agencies in Ohio with my former job at the Lieutenant Governor's office, honestly. And so I started making calls to the liaisons and the agency directors within the state. And fortunately, I had those relationships, and you just put your head down and you do what you can when you go through traumatic events like that, and you do the best for your constituents. And we started immediately, obviously, receiving calls to my office here in Columbus. And so my legislative aide at the time was taking calls and answering emails and just trying to direct people to whatever agency or fill their needs at that time. The short and long-term needs, yeah.
Absolutely incredible. And I want to, you mentioned it a little bit ago, but focus in on the time that you spent in that community, in the days, months, years following. When you initially got to the scene, what were you seeing?
So Saturday after the derailment, when I actually went initially the first day, I just talked to local law enforcement at that time. They were just trying to evacuate people from their homes and keep everyone safe. So just kind of getting an update at that point. Within the first couple of weeks, we actually hosted several of my colleagues here from the House wanted to visit Ground Zero and get a briefing from the Ohio EPA. And so I worked with the EPA director and we put together a tour. And we had several of my colleagues from throughout the state came, and I really appreciated their support throughout this entire process. But they came to East Palestine, and we were briefed at that time, given an update, and were able to tour Ground Zero it was very helpful for my colleagues to give me their input and see their perspective because they had constituents throughout the state that were concerned as well.
Yeah, different people with different skill sets for sure, being
Yeah.
able to assess. On the topic of the scene, in the months following the cleanup and still to this day, there are concerns about the health impacts of this incident due to hazardous material that was either burned or spilled into the water system. Talk me through how these concerns are being addressed.
Yeah, so I think at the time, I was looking at short term, what are the immediate short term concerns that we had to deal with? So we worked with our local health department, the Ohio Department of Health, the Ohio EPA, the Ohio Department of Ag. It's a very rural county and with a lot of animals and farms. So the director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture came in and immediately started holding roundtables. I worked closely with the Farm Bureau. ODNR, the Department of Public Safety, the State Fire Marshal. So we were in contact with all of these different agencies and directors. And so we had to everyone was doing their own work, but collaborating together as well. And I felt that it was my job to help my constituents understand what the immediate short-term needs were, and then also several months down the line, figure out what more of the long-term needs are for the residents of East Palestine.
How did you try to calm folks down, or how are you still trying to calm folks down and assure them? And I mean, clearly you are working for the people. It's so clear just in the first 5 minutes of this podcast and watching you work over the last year or so. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I just be responsive. I am really proud of the staff here in Columbus that answered all the calls and responded to emails. And then I would pick up the phone and I would call the residents, or I would meet with them in person in the district just to listen to what their concerns were. And like I mentioned, there's been just different concerns throughout the past 2.5 years, and we've just kind of tackled each one by one. And my door is always open, and I'm always willing to meet with constituents in the district and listen to them and understand their needs. And if we can be helpful, that's what we try to do.
Yeah, thank you for that. New information has come to light recently surrounding some more health concerns. What are these new concerns for folks who are unaware?
Yes. So recently, about 2 weeks ago, there were new documents that were obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. And that information indicated that the federal EPA may have withheld significant health-specific information from administrators and from the public about the potential for cancer clusters. And so when I heard that, my heart sank. If there is information out there that has not been revealed to Ohioans and to residents of East Palestine, we need to know about it. And so when I first heard about this, I of course reached out to our federal partners. I reached out to Senator Marino and Senator Husted's office and called Congressman Ruley. Congressman Ruley was in the Senate at the time when this derailment happened, so he and I worked hand in hand back in 2023 until he went to Congress. But I immediately spoke to him about this and voiced my concern. And so, my intent for sponsoring this resolution is that if there is information out there that we are not aware of, we need to know about it, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
100%. And you introduced legislation back in 2023, so HR 33. The most recent is HR 147, as you just said there. Talk me through more of the ins and outs of this bill.
Yes. So this resolution, basically it's just suggesting or pushing that the Congress appoint a special committee to to continue investigating the derailment and the information that they may have available.
And I think it's important to hone in on this is directed at this derailment. This isn't just any type of disaster that could have impacted a community or nature, things like this is specifically East Palestine.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, this is specific to East Palestine, that if there is information that the federal government is withholding from the residents, we need to know about it so that we can be, number one, take care of the needs of the residents and the constituents in the district. And number two, learn from this experience. God forbid if it happened in someone else's district.
Yeah. And this was national. I was living in Georgia at the time. And I remember hearing about it and people pronouncing it East Palestine, right? Instead of Palestine, right? Instead of be back in Ohio. And to just hear the gravity of it, it is, amazing that you're still following up and that you were able to draft this legislation pretty quickly after that information.
Yeah, absolutely. After this information came out, I knew that we had to act in some way. And so I'm thankful to the Speaker of the House and the policy team who met with me immediately and helped draft the legislation.
And what is the significance in shifting this to the federal government to really pay attention to any information or the facts or this derailment?
Yeah, so the Freedom of Information Act emails were all from Jim McPherson. He was chosen in September of 2023 to oversee East Palestine recovery from the derailment and also produce a report of unmet needs to the president. And that is another kind of portion that we have never seen an unmet needs report. So that report was never made public. It was never given to the residents. It was never given to the media. So that's kind of another portion of this, but we would like to see that unmet needs report as well.
Yeah. In addition to having, the federal government, obviously with the EPA being involved and things of that sort. How is statewide the jurisdiction that we have here? Is it really in the federal government's hands just because they were national agencies?
Yes, yes, I believe so. I mean, obviously, the Ohio EPA worked very closely with the federal EPA on this issue, but yeah, essentially, it's in their hands. What
message do you think that sends? That hey, we just dropped this legislation. This is a national issue. What do you think that the message that this bill sends?
I just want transparency. I just want transparency for my constituents. I want to know that the information that we're receiving is accurate. And if there are unmet needs, they need to be met. And, we learned a lot from this tragic experience. And I hopefully will be better suited to handle situations like this in the future. God forbid another tragedy happens.
Absolutely. And if this federal committee would be formed, the outcome you would ultimately like to see, as I'm hearing, is just all these just everything being put out there.
Yes, transparency for sure.
Yeah, you would say, your constituents and anyone in the state or anyone that's been impacted by anything like this deserves that.
Yes, absolutely. It's tragic, and the least we can do as a government is provide accurate information to the residents of Ohio.
And so this seemingly is going to be a situation that stays present in your time in the legislature. Hopefully it does resolve sooner rather than later. Talk me through, what other priorities have you had as a lawmaker? Any big bills that you want to talk about that are on the horizon or circulating right now?
Yeah, well, just some other items, I guess, more specific to East Palestine that I kind of didn't mention. We talked kind of about short-term needs, longer-term needs. And so there was a period of time where we were meeting with the business community, for instance, and I worked hand in hand with the Columbiana County Port Authority, and the Port Authority staff was on the ground talking to the needs of the business community. And so we joined together with the Ohio Department of Development, and we announced a $5 million East Palestine Emergency Support Program. So that is just something that we rolled out a couple years ago. And the purpose of that was to assist local businesses with ongoing expenses, working capital needs, and recovery efforts at that time. So that was a successful program and really had an impact on the businesses that were within the village. Another point that I want to touch on is the Senate also conducted the Select Committee on Rail Safety, and that was led by Senator Reineke and Senator Rowley at the time. And so they produced a report specifically based on rail safety. You learn a lot about rail safety when something like this happens. And I learned in a very short amount of time that a lot of that is in the hands of the federal government, and there wasn't much that we could do here locally other than listen to, concerns and suggestions. So I appreciate the Senate making that a priority and producing that report as well. But I think as far as the health component goes, active health monitoring is needed over the course of the next 20 years.
Yeah.
And so that has been put in place. And so, we'll have that information and be able to assess the health needs of the residents, for the next 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So I just want my residents to know that I'm here for the long haul. I know that this isn't just going to go away overnight, unfortunately. And again, their safety is my number one concern. And I will do what I need to do, when I'm here in the legislature, whether it be, I don't know, maybe in the next 6 years, but we'll continue to work on this, whatever the needs are.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And I think you brought up a good point about the business component is, there are other impacts other than the health or, the folks that lost their homes and things like that. The businesses, it's important to support them too.
Yeah, absolutely. We held several business roundtables and heard directly from the business owners and the employees that were affected within the village. And there was certainly a need there. So I have to give credit to the Columbiana County Port Authority, who really stepped up and helped in that area when it was needed.
And so I guess I will ask to wrap up with, for the folks that are watching right now, what would be your, lasting message to them, the folks in East Palestine or people around the state that are, invested in this tragedy?
Yeah, the lasting message is my door is always open. And if you do continue to have ongoing concerns, please call my office and we will continue to be an advocate for you and put you in touch with those agencies at the state level, or we'll keep fighting at the federal level to get more information and transparency.
Well, Representative Monica Robb Blasdel, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
I know I learned, so I was very excited for this too, to learn some more about the situation. I will quickly go over our social media. You can follow us on the Ohio House GOP Caucus on Facebook, Ohio House_GOP on Instagram, and OHR GOP Caucus on Twitter. You can also subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Have a great day.